Greetings, fellow cultivators. Welcome to Autonova. Remember to like and subscribe to support the journey. Now, let's dive into the next chapter of A Will Eternal. After confirming that the giant Ghost King was unharmed, Bai Xiaochun rose to his feet and prepared to offer greetings. But before any greetings left his mouth, he unexpectedly vanished. As for the giant Ghost King, he was feeling very proud of how smoothly everything had gone, and was especially pleased with how he had killed the preceptor of Crosspeak Prefecture without anyone noticing. Xiaochun, this is. Before he could finish speaking, Bai Xiaochun materialized right next to him and slashed out with his hand. The giant Ghost King immediately shot forward with a burst of speed, performing a double-handed incantation gesture that summoned a black mouth of smoke that shot into the air behind him. Even as rumbling sounds echoed out, the giant Ghost King spun in place to find a child-sized little ghost behind him that had just been slashed into two pieces. The green-skinned ghost let out a shriek of pain, and then the two halves of its body faded away into nothing. At that point, an unsightly expression appeared on the giant Ghost King's face. Damn it, that Crosspeak Prefecture demigod secretly hit me with some ghost magic. No, Bai Xiaochun said, his expression somber. Not the Crosspeak Prefecture demigod. The giant Ghost King followed his gaze to a point off in the distance, whereupon his expression flickered. Approaching rapidly was a massive tempest made of innumerable evil ghosts, a tempest that raged with wildly destructive power. Atop the tempest of ghosts was a huge bone lizard that seemed to fill half the sky. It was vicious and cruel, and on top of its head was a crest that looked like a galleon. Two flags flew on the bone galleon, upon which vicious ghost faces could be seen. Their aura combined with the aura of the galleon and the lizard created a ghost chi that filled all heaven and earth. 7 demigods stood on the deck of the bone galleon, all of whom looked with icy yet excited eyes at Bai Xiaochun and the giant Ghost King. However, what had captured Bai Xiaochun's attention was not the demigods, but rather, someone else who stood on the deck. It was a beautiful young woman who seemed like a paragon entity within heaven and earth. She had an attractive figure, fair skin, and delicate features. Her phoenix-like eyes sparkled with extraordinary brightness, making her seem like the awe-inspiring type of person that no one would ever dare to offend. She wore an ornate orange court gown that made her look particularly dazzling. Her long, slender fingers and milky arms made her incredibly entrancing to anyone who could see her. As the bone lizard sped through the air, her orange gown fluttered in the wind, especially the wide, violet-embroidered sleeves. Her gown was embroidered with something that looked like a black underworld city, featuring an enormous gate, out of which flowed an endless stream of howling evil ghosts. Ghostmother, the giant Ghost King said with a gasp. Although he had never seen the true Ghostmother, he had seen Gongsun Wanner, and considering how ghostly and sinister this young woman seemed, and the familiar aura, it only took him a moment to guess who she was. She was none other than Ghostmother. Impossible. How could she have possibly detected our actions so quickly? Did she just happen to be in the area? The giant Ghost King was already starting to devolve into a panic. After all, his previous encounter with Gongsun Wanner in the wildlands had left a deep impression on him. It's not a coincidence, Bai Xiaochun said, his eyes shining with dangerous light as he stared at the incoming bone lizard. She figured out some time ago that we were hiding here. After all, both he and the giant Ghost King were strangers to the Eternal Lands, and although they had been very careful, it was no surprise that someone had been able to track them down. If she knew, then why weren't the demigods in the local prefectures lying in wait for us to? The giant Ghost King was very intelligent, and a profound schemer. Therefore, before he even finished giving voice to his question, he came up with the answer, and it caused an unsightly expression to appear on his face. She knows more about the Heavenspan realm than anyone else in the Vile Emperor dynasty, Bai Xiaochun said. It's only natural for her to be a bit greedy because of that. It wasn't difficult to guess at Ghostmother's plan. She was confident in being able to handle Bai Xiaochun and the giant Ghost King, and hoped to capture and consume them. It caused Bai Xiaochun's heart to sink, and nervousness to prickle at the back of his mind. But it was an unavoidable fight, and he had one advantage: he could pick the battlefield. Eyes flashing, he backed up rapidly, joined by the giant Ghost King. Both of them felt their battle spirit rising, and clearly, both were thinking the same thing. The battle would be best fought, not on the third immortal domain, but out on the eternal sea. In addition, they would fight and flee at the same time. That would be the best way to prevent reinforcements from arriving, and would increase their chances of avoiding defeat. Even as Bai Xiaochun and the giant Ghost King fled, Ghostmother's eyes flashed with bright light, and she waved her finger. In response, the 7 demigod experts flew off the deck of the bone galleon, becoming beams of bright light that shot forward with incredible speed. They were like sharp swords that could slice through any obstacles as they headed directly toward Bai Xiaochun and the giant Ghost King. Bai Xiaochun, Ghostmother said, her eyes radiating determination. Despite having taken Hu Xiaomei as an apprentice, and also having had dealings with Bai Xiaochun, as soon as she was assigned to oversee the third immortal domain last month, she had made her decision. She was the only person from the Vile Emperor dynasty to have ever entered the Heavenspan realm, and then come back out alive. Because of that, and the fact that she was in the early celestial realm, the Vile Emperor valued her highly. In fact, that was why he had assigned her with the task of overseeing the manhunt for Heavenspan cultivators. Although she had only arrived in the third immortal domain recently, that was because, for the previous better part of a year, she had been in the first and second immortal domains. Because of her familiarity with the aura of Heavenspan cultivators, she had developed a technique to hunt them down that only she could employ. And the entire time, she had been trying to locate Bai Xiaochun. Her experiences in the Heavenspan realm, as well as her cooperation with the Gravekeeper, ensured that she knew just about everything about Bai Xiaochun. All of that led her to the conclusion that Bai Xiaochun was a rarity among rarities. In the end, not even the Vile Emperor could possibly know as much about Bai Xiaochun as Ghostmother. Therefore, whether it was the secrets of spirit enhancement that she had extracted from the blood of Heavenspan cultivators, or the authority conferred upon her by the Vile Emperor, she had decided to focus the majority of her search efforts on locating Bai Xiaochun. When she finally confirmed his general whereabouts several days ago, she had refrained from mobilizing the prefectural forces that she had suddenly taken over from Celestial Virupaksha. Instead, she headed in his direction with her own personal subordinates, in the hopes of capturing him secretly. How could she have ever guessed that, in the few days it would take her to reach him, Bai Xiaochun would do something so daring? The death of a demigod was not some insignificant matter. As a celestial, Ghostmother could theoretically sweep the matter under the rug, but it wouldn't be easy. But then there was the matter of the medicinal plant farms in Cloudsea Prefecture's capital city. The dramatic theft of those resources was something that affected the prefecture as a whole. Therefore, the matter had instantly turned into a big headache. Most important of all was the fact that the tribute to the Vile Emperor had been stolen. Nothing like that had even happened before, and there was no way Ghostmother could hide the news. She knew that, as of this point, consuming Bai Xiaochun wasn't an option. She had originally had the initiative but had now lost it, and therefore, it filled her heart with extreme anger. Numerous thoughts raced through Ghostmother's mind as the bone lizard sped through the sky toward Bai Xiaochun and the giant Ghost King. From a distance, it was possible to see the fearsome energy of the bone lizard distorting the air around it as it moved. In the Heavenspan realm, a mighty bone lizard like this could cause mountains to crumble and the land to shatter with its passing. But these were the eternal immortal domains, and therefore, the mighty energy fluctuations did little to the surrounding landscape, much less the roiling eternal sea. Compared to the huge lizard, Bai Xiaochun and the giant Ghost King were like tiny bugs. As the intense energy of the lizard got closer and closer, the giant Ghost King's heart began to race as he sensed his cultivation base beginning to grow unstable. "What kind of ship is that?" he said, his scalp tingling in shock. At that point, Bai Xiaochun waved his hand, causing a moon-shaped flash of light to emerge from his bag of holding. It was his moonflower, the same one which had appeared during his fight with Taoist Heavenspan. After spending the better part of the past year in recovery, the moonflower was mostly back to normal. Furthermore, the aura of its home, and the familiar spiritual energy of heaven and earth here, ensured that it was bursting with excitement. Directed by Bai Xiaochun, the moonflower shot toward the giant Ghost King and coiled protectively around him, defending him against the pressure from the bone galleon to some degree. When the giant Ghost King saw the moonflower, his eyes went wide, especially considering that it emanated fluctuations equivalent to the Great Circle of the demigod realm. What the hell is that? Fudge, the Great Circle of the demigod realm? It's stronger than me. The added boost from the moonflower helped the giant Ghost King speed up, and together with Bai Xiaochun, he flew deeper into the eternal sea. As the two of them sped along, black flames suddenly rose up in the eyes of the bone lizard that made it seem intelligent to a certain degree. At the same time, Ghostmother performed an incantation gesture, causing the lizard's mouth to open and emit a howl in Bai Xiaochun's direction. Along with the howl came black flames that also bore down on Bai Xiaochun. It was a raging sea of fire, its heat so intense that it seemed it could melt anything that got in its way. Bai Xiaochun's expression flickered at the terrifying power he sensed in the sea of flames. Without any hesitation, he spun, clenched his hand into a fist, and unleashed a punch. The power of his fleshly body erupted, and numerous shockwaves rolled out as his fist made contact with the sea of flames. A deafening boom filled the air as the sea of flames suddenly lurched to a halt as surely as if it were a person who had been grabbed by the throat. Ghostmother snorted coldly, sending another command to the bone lizard. Another howl erupted from its mouth, accompanied by a second sea of flames. However, this one was vastly more powerful than the last, and it immediately destroyed the tempest that had been created by Bai Xiaochun's fist strike. Then, it coalesced into the shape of an enormous, fiery ghost face, which lunged forward ravenously. It was at this point that the 7 demigod cultivators closed in like 7 shooting stars. In the blink of an eye, they were right on top of Bai Xiaochun and the giant ghost king. 3 of them performed incantation gestures to summon huge, flaming birds that let out ear-piercing shrieks. The birds merged with the demigods, giving them additional speed that they used to attack the giant ghost king. An unsightly expression could be seen on the giant ghost king's face as he fell back and waved his hand, sending a mist of ghosts out to defend himself. At the same time, the Moonflower held nothing back to aid him. Already, a major battle was underway right over the Eternal Sea. As the fiery ghost face closed in, Bai Xiaochun used the power of the Live Forever Codex to fuel his Cloud Lightning Forefather transformation. Roaring, he transformed to a height of more than 300 meters. Looking like the forefather of all humanity, the original arch-ancestor, he leapt forward, throwing his arms out wide as he slammed into the ghost face. The ghost face howled in response, and yet, was powerless to defend itself, and shattered into innumerable black sparks that fell down to the eternal sea below. No wonder the Gravekeeper picked him, Ghostmother thought, looking down coldly at Bai Xiaochun. And he was able to defeat Taoist Heavenspan too. He must have plenty of trump cards at his disposal. Instead of impulsively rushing into the fighting herself, she waited on the deck of the bone galleon. During the months in which she had been hunting down Heavenspan cultivators, she had collected quite a few clues that gave her a fairly good understanding of the final, spectacular battle between Bai Xiaochun and Taoist Heavenspan. She was still completely and utterly confident that, since she was in the early celestial realm, she was superior to Bai Xiaochun. And yet, she still maintained caution. Her bone lizard was the envy of the other celestials in the Vile Emperor dynasty, and therefore, she relied on it to carry out the initial attack on Bai Xiaochun. Chuckling coldly, she performed another incantation gesture, causing yet another black sea of flames to erupt out. Within it was a 9-meter column of light that shot directly toward Bai Xiaochun. And yet, things weren't over yet. Ghostmother now performed an incantation gesture with her left hand, causing a magical symbol to appear there. At that point, the 2 ghost flags on the deck of the battleship began to wave, and the ghost faces emerged, joining the sea of flames in the attack. Bai Xiaochun's expression was unsightly to the extreme. He had known all along that Ghostmother would not be easy to deal with. Her bone lizard and its seas of flame contained terrifying destructive power, and only 3 bursts of it had already filled the area with a deadly miasma. Although Bai Xiaochun had shocking powers of regeneration, the way the miasma constantly ate away at him caused him to frown. Then there was the beam of light, which he could instantly tell was too powerful for him to face directly. And last were the 2 ghost faces. Although they didn't match up to the laughing crying ghost face, they still radiated the power of the quasi-celestial level, and were obviously very intelligent. Ghostmother must already know about my fight with Taoist Heavenspan. That's why she's being so careful. She wants me to use my trump cards early on. However, I can't do that this close to the borders of the Vile Emperor dynasty. Gritting his teeth, he faced the beam of light, the sea of flames, and the ghost face, and clenched his hand into a fist. Instantly, a black vortex sprang up around it. Then, rumbling sounds echoed out as a shadowy emperor appeared, radiating domineering energy left and right. I've never fought a true celestial before. Let's see how far away I actually am from the Mahayana realm. His eyes were completely bloodshot as wild energy fluctuations erupted from his fist. On the bone galleon, Ghostmother's phoenix-like eyes narrowed. Despite having been in the Heavenspan realm for many years, she had been stuck in the Deadmire for most of that time. Furthermore, Bai Xiaochun had progressed significantly since the last time she had encountered him, on the eve of her departure. Therefore, she didn't have a thorough understanding of all of his divine abilities and magical techniques. Nor was she aware of all of his trump cards. Because of that, she wouldn't make the mistake of underestimating him. Although she didn't quite view him as being on the same level as herself, she did think of him as being stronger than Taoist Heavenspan. As soon as she saw the vortex springing up around his hand, her eyes flashed. At the same time, a howl erupted from the mouth of Bai Xiaochun's forefather transformation form. Stepping forward, he gathered the power of the black vortex, and punched out toward the incoming beam of light. It was a quintuple power undying Emperor's fist. Massive rumbling sounds filled heaven and earth as the shadowy Emperor also punched out. The two fists overlapped, and then mountain toppling, sea-draining power smashed into the black beam of light. A huge boom rang out as the black beam of light struggled to fight back, but then shattered. Then, Bai Xiaochun's undying Emperor's fist went on to hit the sea of flames. It was like a raging dragon had sliced through the middle of the fire, cutting the sea of flames into two halves. Then, the fist strike continued on toward the ghost faces. By that point, though, it was getting weaker. And given how extraordinary the ghost faces were, when they collided, the undying Emperor's fist was vanquished. And yet, Bai Xiaochun's expression didn't even flicker in response, although he was panting for breath. If quintuple won't work, then I'll double it. Decuple power. An even more shocking pulse of fleshly body power erupted out, becoming a wildly destructive windstorm that slammed into the two ghost faces. It was at this point that Ghostmother's expression flickered. The power of Bai Xiaochun's decuple power undying Emperor's fist was something that could be considered rare even among the divine abilities of the Eternal Lands. The two ghost faces were completely shaken, and had no choice other than to twist to the side to try to avoid the blow. With the two ghost faces out of the way, Bai Xiaochun was now facing the huge bone lizard. Without any hesitation, he used his undying hex, becoming a series of afterimages that appeared right above the bone galleon a moment later. Making eye contact with Ghostmother, Bai Xiaochun clenched his right hand into a fist, and then punched at her with another decuple power undying Emperor's fist. As for Ghostmother, although she was clearly shocked, there was a bit of a scornful look in her eyes. Even as Bai Xiaochun's fist strike closed in, a powerful blood chi sprang up around the bone lizard, which rapidly formed into a defensive shield. It wasn't a spell formation, but rather a divine ability connected to the bone galleon, and it formed just in time to meet Bai Xiaochun's incoming fist strike. And although a massive boom echoed out, the shield did not fall. Furthermore, a significant backlash attack hit Bai Xiaochun, causing his face to fall. Unlike the beam of light or the sea of flames, this blood mist shield was powerful in defensive strength. In fact, it seemed to be on a completely different level. Cracking sounds rang out inside of Bai Xiaochun as he was thrown backwards, his 5 yin organs in chaos to the point where he felt like he might explode. How arrogant, Ghostmother said scornfully. Waving her hand, she summoned 2 enormous ghost hands, which lunged toward Bai Xiaochun as if to grab him. Simultaneously, the bone lizard spat out another sea of fire, cutting off any path of escape. As all of this happened, Bai Xiaochun's powers of regeneration kicked in, and his backlash injuries began to disappear. Then he burst into motion, piercing through the sea of flames and punching out toward the ghost hands. Within moments, he was completely back to normal, provoking a slight gasp from Ghostmother. Such powers of regeneration. As of this moment, she finally understood how it was possible that Taoist Heavenspan had been defeated. That is his true secret weapon. But what other trump cards does he have? By now, Ghostmother's heart burned with true greed. Based on their very short interchange, Bai Xiaochun already understood a lot more about the battleship than before. Now that's a battleship, he thought. It's actually stronger than Ghostmother herself. Especially its defenses. Absolutely terrifying. And it's so fast. By now, he was relatively certain that even a blow from the Greatsword of the North wouldn't do much to this ship. Nor would Ghostmother give him the time to prepare to do so. Ghostmother has true celestial battle prowess, but not enough to make her a major problem for me. Having reached this conclusion, he decided that at the moment, the true threat was not Ghostmother, but rather, the battleship. Meanwhile, Ghostmother took a deep breath. The greed in her eyes hadn't faded a bit. Performing an incantation gesture, she waved her finger, causing screams to erupt from the 2 ghost faces that had just evaded Bai Xiaochun moments ago. Driven by the torment of the restrictive spells inside of them, they turned and headed toward Bai Xiaochun again. At the same time, the battleship began to vibrate, causing the air around it to distort. Apparently, it was building up power to unleash one massive attack. Bai Xiaochun's eyes flickered with the realization that he couldn't fight this battleship. However, it wouldn't necessarily be impossible to lock it down temporarily. Completely ignoring the 2 ghost faces, he unleashed his frigid domain and summoned 9 frigid clones, which he sent toward the ghost faces, not in the hopes of defeating them, but just delaying them. Then he howled, unleashing another undying Emperor's fist with decuple power, directly toward the bone galleon itself. As the fist shot out, a massive vortex appeared. He didn't pause for even a moment. Relying on the regenerative powers of his undying blood, he unleashed a second fist strike, then a third and a fourth. Boom, boom, boom. Relentless attacks. And the vortexes only continued to grow stronger. Ghostmother's face fell as, in the space of a few short breaths of time, Bai Xiaochun unleashed 10-decouple power Undying Emperor's fists. Even with his powers of regeneration, it was a level of wastage so intense that it created something like a black hole of spiritual energy, which almost instantly drained everything in a wide area. All of a sudden, the bone battleship was deprived of its fuel source and was incapable of moving. Although it was only temporary, and would last no more than 10 breaths of time, that was plenty of time for Bai Xiaochun to work with. Without pausing, he flew back toward the giant Ghost King, who despite having the Moonflower to help him, was being battered soundly by the 7 other demigods. Before any of the demigods could react, Bai Xiaochun reached out and clamped his hand down onto the head of the one nearest him. He moved so quickly that the man had no chance to dodge or evade. Then, terrifying might erupted from his hand, filling the demigod with a sensation of deadly crisis. Howling, he immediately resorted to self-detonation to try to block Bai Xiaochun. As his nascent divinity attempted to flee, the Moonflower shot out and gobbled it up. At the same time, Bai Xiaochun grabbed the giant Ghost King and rocketed off into the distance. In the blink of an eye, he was far, far away. Only 6 demigods remained on the battlefield, their scalps tingling in fear at the way Bai Xiaochun had just attacked. For the moment, none of them seemed willing to chase after him. In their moment of hesitation, the bone battleship erupted with a mist of blood. No longer affected by what Bai Xiaochun had just done, the ship sprang into motion again. As the bone lizard broke free, Ghostmother's expression flickered grimly, and yet at the same time, with greed. Pointing off into the distance, she said, "Catch him. Or die trying." Bai Xiaochun was already 5,000 kilometers away, his heart pounding. He could sense that the vortex he had created was gone, which meant that the battleship was likely closing in at top speed. Complete and utter bullying, the giant Ghost King grumbled. His face was pale, and he looked quite bedraggled. Without the help of the Moonflower just now, he would have suffered a bitter defeat at the hands of the other demigods. If I had the Grand Heaven Master and the other heavenly kings to back me up, we 5 could definitely have stood up to them. The giant Ghost King was actually feeling quite embarrassed by how the fight had played out. "It's a good thing we hatched our plan and left that town," Bai Xiaochun said. "If we had been caught by Ghostmother there, we would have been like fish in a barrel." At the moment, he was feeling very irritated. Considering the look of wild ambition he had seen in Ghostmother's eyes, he was sure that she would chase him down to the bitter end. If he were in the Heavenspan realm, things would have been a bit easier, with plenty of options and places to go to remain safe. But in the Eternal Lands, and on the border of the Vile Emperor dynasty, it was too dangerous to allow any delays to occur. "If only I could get Ghostmother off of that battleship," he thought with a sigh. Unfortunately, Ghostmother was being very careful, and hadn't made any slip ups. Right now, he had no options. Sending his divine sense out, he scanned the eternal sea, and yet saw nothing but endless water, with no places to hole up. As Bai Xiaochun and the giant Ghost King anxiously tried to come up with a plan, massive rumbling sounds could be heard coming from the bone lizard behind them. When the howls of the evil ghosts that made up the black cloud reached Bai Xiaochun and the giant Ghost King, their pupils constricted. A moment ago, the bone lizard had used the blood mist to gain an additional burst of speed that sent it rocketing forward even faster than before. Bai Xiaochun only had the time to flick his sleeve to separate himself and the giant Ghost King, then turn to face the bone lizard. Cracking sounds could be heard as rifts opened up everywhere. However, these were the Eternal Lands, and therefore, the rifts healed almost immediately. Meanwhile, a sea of flames had erupted out of the mouth of the bone lizard, sending intense heat out in all directions. Yet again, the black beam of light shot out, filled with deadly power. The 2 ghost faces were also present, and were fanning out as if to block Bai Xiaochun and the giant Ghost King's path. It was a moment of deadly crisis, and there was no time to contemplate the situation. Bai Xiaochun immediately threw his hands out. Water swamp. Water vapor roiled out, turning the world hazy. Even as Ghostmother's eyes narrowed up on the battleship, Bai Xiaochun threw his arms down. Kingdom. Roar. Heaven and earth trembled as a beastly howl filled the air that seemed to come from countless years in the past. As it echoed out, a huge black landmass rose up from within the watery swamp. Blood scales and bloodshot eyes could be seen, along with a fishy odor as a gigantic crocodilian head appeared. By the time the lower jaw was visible, the demigods present were so stunned that their jaws dropped. As for the bone lizard, it was huge, but compared to this crocodilian creature, it actually looked insignificant. "What is that?" That was what all the demigods were thinking as they rushed backward in retreat. Meanwhile, the huge crocodilian mouth opened and snapped toward the bone lizard. The giant ghost king knew Bai Xiaochun well, but when he saw this, he was so shaken his eyes nearly popped out of his skull. Is that really a divine ability? He thought, his heart pounding with fear. He also backed up, doing everything in his power to get as far away as he could. Bai Xiaochun did the same thing, not even waiting to see what would happen behind him as he fled with the giant ghost king. The bone lizard wanted to give chase, but it was too late as the huge crocodilian mouth snapped down onto it. From a distance, it almost looked like the crocodilian creature had risen up out of the eternal sea and swallowed the lizard. The battleship seemed powerless to fight back. Not even the blood mist shield could help it to flee out of the closing crocodilian mouth. The enemy demigods were terrified to find that they couldn't get out of the affected area. The mouth slammed shut, causing intense rumbling sounds to fill the air. Then, the crocodilian creature sank back down, making it seem almost like it was going down into the waters of the eternal sea. When the crocodilian head disappeared, the watery swamp faded away. After about 10 seconds passed, the rumbling sounds were gone. Then, a rift broke open, and the bone lizard shot out, howling the entire way. It was visibly damaged. Although the water swamp kingdom hadn't destroyed it, it had inflicted serious injuries. Apparently, the water swamp kingdom was even stronger when unleashed within the eternal lands. Although Ghostmother looked slightly anxious, her eyes glowed with excitement. So, I finally got you to pull out a true trump card. And don't you dare think that using it on me a second time will have the same results. She chuckled, a sound filled with both avarice and anticipation. Bai Xiaochun was even stronger than she had hoped, and now that he had revealed his true trump card, she felt confident enough to attack him directly. Smiling a radiant smile, she turned the battleship in his direction and began to chase him down. She only had 3 demigods left, but was confident that if she could get her hands on Bai Xiaochun, it would all be worth it. You're mine, Bai Xiaochun, all mine. Ghostmother licked her lips slowly, a sight that, if anyone could see it who didn't know the current circumstances, would have jumped to very different conclusions about what was going on. Several thousand kilometers away, Bai Xiaochun and the giant ghost king were fleeing across the eternal sea. Grim expressions covered their faces, and neither was saying much. As for the giant ghost king, bitterness and unease filled his heart. The terrifying strength of Ghostmother had already sapped his hope of reaching the Saint Emperor dynasty. What do we do? He murmured inwardly. We have to think of something? Of course, he hadn't noticed that a strange light that had begun to glitter in Bai Xiaochun's eyes. Bai Xiaochun simply wasn't willing to give up. He was now confident that if it weren't for the bone galleon, even a celestial like Ghostmother wouldn't be able to kill him. Ghostmother's only strength lay in that battleship. I wonder how Hu Xiaomei is doing, he thought. After all, Ghostmother had brought Hu Xiaomei and Big Fatty Zhang with her to the Eternal Lands, and yet, he hadn't seen any hint that they were currently with her. Presumably, Ghostmother would remain tight-lipped if he tried to get any information about them from her. You know, 2 measly demigods is not a very good blood tribute. We need to do something far more shocking. Expression flickering, and eyes turning more bloodshot, he began to build on an idea he had just come up with moments before. After some more thought, he turned and grabbed the giant ghost king's shoulder. Hey, old pal, what do you think about kidnapping Ghostmother? What kind of reward do you think the Saint Emperor would give us for her? The giant ghost king had just been thinking about ways to escape the situation when Bai Xiaochun grabbed him. When he looked over and saw the wild look in Bai Xiaochun's eyes, and heard his suggestion, he was completely taken aback. Kidnap Ghostmother? Something about the whole situation seemed very familiar, but there was no time to think about that now. The mere idea left the giant ghost king feeling stunned. After all, there were a total of 6 celestials in the Vile Emperor dynasty, all of whom were shocking figures. If one were to be kidnapped, it would send shockwaves through all of the eternal lands. That would be a blood tribute that defied the imaginations of everyone. We shouldn't do anything impulsive, Xiaochun, he began. After all, the 2 of them were currently fleeing from certain death. To the giant ghost king, Bai Xiaochun's suggestion seemed almost ludicrous. Come on, yes, or no, Bai Xiaochun said, glaring. If the giant ghost king had immediately agreed, he might have hesitated. After all, the idea really was a bit crazy. But when he saw how nervous the giant ghost king was, he felt more than a little annoyed. Forehead veins bulging, he gritted his teeth and said, Giant ghost, old pal, didn't you say you wanted to do something momentous? What could be better than kidnapping a celestial? You want big? If we do that, it'll shake all of the eternal lands. The giant ghost king's heart began to pound as he thought, why not kidnap an Archean then? But then he suddenly realized why the look in Bai Xiaochun's eyes seemed so familiar. Fudge, that's what he looked like when he kidnapped me. He's a kidnapping expert. A wry smile broke out on the giant ghost king face. Then he gritted his teeth and said, all right, let's do it. How do we pull it off? Bai Xiaochun's face was a bit flushed, and his heart was pounding. The realization that he was considering kidnapping a celestial confirmed that he had changed a lot from his old self. After all, this was a true celestial, not a quasi-celestial like Taoist heavenspan. This was Ghostmother, a Mahayana realm expert with an astounding bone galleon at her command. Fudge, what's there to be scared of? I'm the Arch-Ancestor, a quasi-celestial with the Great Sword of the North. Besides, when I was in core formation, I kidnapped a demigod. When I was a diva, I smacked Taoist heavenspan across the side of the face. This wimpy Ghostmother should be easy to kidnap. It all seemed completely crazy, and yet that only served to get Bai Xiaochun's heart racing in excitement. It really was just like that time all those years ago in the Wildlands when he and the little turtle had kidnapped the giant ghost king. It was the exact same feeling, except stronger. Taking a deep breath, he turned to look at the giant ghost king, his eyes crimson. Don't worry, giant ghost, old pal, he said through gritted teeth, I have a lot of experience kidnapping people. The giant ghost king's eyes were just as bloodshot, and to be honest, he wasn't very happy about what Bai Xiaochun had just said, particularly the have a lot of experience line. Expression unsightly, he barked, what, you think I'm scared of some old shrew like Ghostmother? Ignoring him, Bai Xiaochun stroked his chin, eyes glittering as countless ideas raced through his mind, especially thoughts about what had worked so well when he had kidnapped the giant ghost king all those years ago. Lowering his voice, he said, based on my kidnapping experience, I think the best thing to do is get it all done in one shot. Sort of like how I did with you. Strike like lightning. He was so wrapped up in his ideas that he didn't notice how the giant ghost king was clearly sinking into a very angry mood. Hit the battleship hard, get inside, grab Ghostmother, and then get out of there. Either that, or get Ghostmother to come out of the galleon. Just like when I dragged you out of the spell formation in that big stone turtle. The giant ghost king snorted coldly as he thought back to what it had been like being kidnapped. Every time such memories floated up into his mind, he felt the impulse to beat the crap out of Bai Xiaochun. Right now was no exception. However, the differences in their cultivation bases ensured that all he did was sigh. Once she's off of that bone galleon, I can distract her temporarily. And that's where you'll come in, giant ghost, old pal. You see, we're not just going to kidnap Ghostmother, we're going to steal her bone galleon. And all her magical items too. If we're going to do something monumental, then monumental it's gonna be. With that, he went on to explain the plan in detail, especially certain critical aspects that required particular attention. As the giant ghost king listened, his eyes got wider and wider, and he suddenly realized how unlucky Ghostmother was to have encountered Bai Xiaochun. At the same time, hearing the plan laid out eased a bit of his nervousness. Although it wasn't a perfect plan, it seemed highly likely that it would work. Before long, black mist filled the sky behind them, and the bone lizard appeared, racing toward them from off in the distance. Bai Xiaochun gritted his teeth as the moment of truth arrived. When it came to kidnapping Ghostmother, he knew that his battle prowess was a problem. Therefore, as the bone lizard approached, he smacked his bag of holding to make contact with the Great Sword of the North. Then he sent his thoughts inside to try to contact the frigid matriarch. A moment later, his eyes lit up. Although the frigid matriarch wasn't responding, he sensed a reaction from the laughing crying ghost face. Suddenly, blue light flashed inside of his bag of holding as the sealed laughing crying ghost face was released. Bai Xiaochun had left the laughing crying ghost face inside of the world of the sword, and had never given him much thought later. However, after the frigid matriarch became the spirit automaton, she simply couldn't do nothing about the old ghost that had competed with her to become the spirit automaton. She didn't torment him endlessly, but did enslave him. Once the ghost face was out in the open, it was clear that he had changed. There was no trace of a smile on his face, only a frown. However, as soon as he came into contact with the aura of the eternal lands, he began to recover from his previously weakened state. This, he stammered excitedly, then turned and noticed Bai Xiaochun. He immediately shivered as he recalled the dark memories of what Bai Xiaochun had done to him. Then he noticed the bone lizard closing in. Heavens! Everybody's here. Never could the ghost face have imagined that, right upon being released, he would run into so many familiar faces. His initial instinct was to run, but before he could, Bai Xiaochun glared at him. Didn't you say that you're a quasi-Archean? With a cultivation base like that, what are you scared of? He emphasized his words with a cold snort that resonated with the enslavement seal that had been placed onto the ghost face by the Great Sword of the North. Before the ghost face could even react, he spun in place and then shot toward the bone lizard. No, I haven't fully recovered yet. And I was exaggerating back then. When the vile emperor captured me, I was a quasi-Archean, but then he refined my soul, and Ghostmother imprisoned me. And later, Taoist Heavenspan ripped a part of me away. I'm not a quasi-Archean anymore. I'm sorry for everything. I can't do this. Unfortunately for the ghost face, he couldn't control himself at all, and immediately closed in on the bone lizard. Meanwhile, the giant ghost king let out a shout as he became a bright beam of light that also charged toward the bone lizard. The moonflower joined him, radiating the fluctuations of the great circle of the demigod realm, as well as boundless ferocity. Then Bai Xiaochun gritted his teeth, drawing upon fleshly body power that surpassed the quasi-celestial level. When Ghostmother saw the sudden, coordinated attack, she frowned. She had already seen the giant ghost king and the moonflower fighting earlier, but was very surprised to see the laughing, crying ghost face. I can't believe Bai Xiaochun has that old ghost working for him. Eyes narrowing, she performed a double-handed incantation gesture, causing a sea of flames to erupt from the lizard's mouth. The laughing, crying ghost face was the first to meet the sea of flames. He seemed to be on the verge of weeping as he howled, forced to go all out. Opening his mouth, he sent out an evil wind that slammed into the fire and cut it completely in half. This ghost had once existed as the primary flag on the Bone Lizard battleship, and therefore had a good understanding of it. After slashing the sea of flames in two, he found himself facing the black beam of light. Roaring, he slammed into it, consuming the light in one huge gulp. Meanwhile, the other two ghost faces were so scared that they struggled against Ghostmother's control to back up. Without anything blocking the way, the laughing, crying ghost face and Bai Xiaochun appeared right above the main deck of the bone galleon. As for the ghost face, he had no control of himself, and lunged forward to slam into the ship. Chuckling coldly, Ghostmother said, "So, that old ghost is another of your trump cards." Waving her hand, she summoned the Crimson Defensive Mist, which could block all divine abilities launched by Bai Xiaochun and his allies. The laughing, crying ghost face hit the Crimson Mist and suffered a significant backlash attack that sent him flying backward, screaming. Next up was the Moonflower. A second boom rang out as cracks spread out on the Moonflower's stalk. Howling, the giant ghost king put everything on the line to transform into a giant ghost that head-butted the shield. After sustaining 3 blows one after the other, the blood mist was beginning to weaken, which was exactly when Bai Xiaochun unleashed his undying Emperor's Fist. A thunderous boom rang out as the blood mist sent out another backlash attack. However, it was not very strong, considering the repeated attacks it had just taken. Blood oozing out of the corners of his mouth, Bai Xiaochun extended his right hand to once again summon the Great Sword of the North. The blue sword radiated the aura of a world treasure as he slashed it into the blood mist. Ghostmother gasped, and a strange light appeared in her eyes. She had been waiting for some time for Bai Xiaochun to use the Great Sword of the North. In the last several months, she had heard many stories about it, and had come to a basic understanding of what it was. "So, you've finally pulled out that sword." Chuckling, she performed a double-handed incantation gesture and then shoved both hands down toward the bone galleon. Thus, this episode comes to an end. Remember to like and comment so we can discuss the story together. Until we meet again in the next chapters.